In the shadow of the gallows, the air was thick with the scent of fear and the solemn weight of justice. The crowd, a sea of faces, was hushed, their eyes fixed on the platform where the condemned men stood, shackled and trembling. It was a day that would be etched in the memory of every witness, a stark reminder of the king's power and the relentless hand of the law. In the medieval kingdom of Aragon, the king's word was law, and the law was a double-edged sword, capable of both protecting the innocent and striking down the guilty. King Peter the Ceremonious, a man whose name was synonymous with royal authority, ruled with an iron fist, and his subjects knew that the slightest act of defiance could mean the gallows. The men on the platform had been accused of treason, a crime that carried the ultimate punishment, death. Ramon Frank, Pierre Sala, Jaume Great, and Burnet Casteller were among the many who had dared to plot against the king. They had been caught, tried, and found guilty. Despite their pleas of innocence, the king's justice was swift and merciless. As the noose was tightened around their necks, the crowd watched in silence, some with pity, others with satisfaction. The law demanded their deaths, and the king, as the law's supreme executor, would see it done. But the king's use of the death penalty was not just about punishing the guilty. It was a tool of governance, a way to maintain order and strike fear into the hearts of those who might challenge his authority. Peter the Ceremonious was a shrewd ruler, and he understood that the threat of death was a powerful motivator. The more his subjects feared him, the more they would obey. This was evident in the story of Burnet de Cabrera, a trusted royal counselor who found himself on the wrong side of the king's favor. Accused of treason, Cabrera was tried, found guilty, and sentenced to death. The king's own hand signed the order, and Cabrera was beheaded in Saragossa, a public spectacle that left no doubt about the king's power and the consequences of betrayal. The king's justice was not always swift, however. Sometimes it was a slow and deliberate process, designed to maximize the impact of the punishment. When the municipal representatives of Vic refused to retract their oath of loyalty to Burnet de Cabrera's son, the king's patience ran out. He declared them in rebellion and ordered their arrest. Without a trial, they were condemned to death. The king even ordered the construction of special gallows in the city's market square, a grim reminder of the price of defiance, but the king's power was not absolute. It was tempered by the law and the expectations of his subjects. The king could not simply act on a whim. He had to justify his actions within the framework of justice. This was a delicate balance, and the king had to navigate it carefully. When he condemned the rebels of the Union in Valencia, he did so with a detailed account of their crimes and the evidence against them. The punishments were severe, but they were meant to send a message. The king was the ultimate authority, and those who defied him would face the harshest consequences. In 1363, the king's half-brother, Prince Ferdinand, was accused of plotting to take the throne. When he resisted arrest, the king ordered his execution, invoking the principle of justice. The king's word was law, and in the moment of crisis, he acted with the authority of a sovereign, ensuring that the threat to his rule was eliminated. The death of Alfonso, the Kind in 1336, marked a turning point. His widow, Queen Eleanor, fled to Castile, fearing reprisals from her stepson, Peter the Ceremonious. Her fears were not unfounded. The tensions within the royal family were deep and dangerous. When Peter the Ceremonious died in 1387, his last wife, Sibylla of Forcia, also fled, taking her loyal followers with her. The new king, John I, accused her supporters of treason and had them executed, their bodies mutilated and displayed as a warning to others. The king's power to punish was a double-edged sword. It could maintain order and protect the realm, but it could also instill fear and resentment. The people of Aragon lived under the shadow of the gallows, knowing that the king's justice was both swift and unforgiving. In this world, the line between justice and tyranny was often blurred, and the king's power was a constant reminder of the price of defiance. In the neighboring kingdom of Castile, the royal family and the leading figures in the court lived in constant fear of the king. The monarch was quick to threaten and order the deaths of barons, wielding his power as a guarantor of justice with no limits beyond his own will. Romanist jurists justified this absolute royal power, framing it as necessary for the common good. The ability to apply the death penalty was a key element in consolidating the king's authority, whether through actual executions or the mere threat of them. In the Crown of Aragon, the king's power to impose the death penalty was a visible symbol of his authority, especially when it came to punishing the weakest or the most powerful members of society. The king's close advisors and nobles were not immune to this fear. For example, under King Alfonso the Kind, Lop de Concud was executed, and under King Peter the Ceremonious, Bernat de Cabrera faced the same fate. Similarly, King John I ordered the deaths of Berenguer d'Abila and Bartholomew de Luynes. These executions served to demonstrate the king's control over the nobility, who lacked the protection of municipal solidarity or established legal networks. When King John I died in 1396, tensions between the main cities, particularly Barcelona and Valencia, and the king's councillors reached a boiling point. The councillors were accused of plunging the country into poverty and conspiring against the king. After John's sudden death, almost everyone close to him was arrested and accused of a range of corrupt practices. The accusations were so serious that they even suggested the councillors were responsible for the king's spiritual well-being, implying that their actions had sent his soul to purgatory. 2 of the accused claimed to have interviewed the deceased king, either through a dream or a visit to purgatory, to clear their names. Despite the severe charges, the accused were eventually absolved in 1398. This outcome was not just about avoiding executions. It also served to consolidate the city of Barcelona's influence and demonstrate the new King Martin's magnanimity, which helped strengthen royal power. The death penalty was not a tool to be used arbitrarily, but was invoked or adapted according to the circumstances. For example, in 1377, during a jurisdictional dispute in Tarragona, King Peter the Ceremonious ordered his vicar to hang the archbishop's vicar and his supporters. This action highlighted the ongoing struggle for power between the monarchy and other authorities, such as the nobility and municipal leaders. Roman law provided the basis for justifying the monarch's judicial capacity, and jurists like James of Viterbo emphasized that judging was a key aspect of royal power. King Peter the Ceremonious himself claimed that his role as a sovereign included offering privileges, imparting justice, and defending the country. He often personally pronounced sentences, especially in serious cases involving capital punishment. For instance, in 1369, he personally sentenced a traitor in Sardinia to be quartered, and a spy to be dragged and hanged. The king's ability to show mercy, such as commuting the death penalty for Count James of Urgell in 1413, was another way to display his power and magnanimity. The king's role in maintaining order was evident in his response to social upheavals. After the pogroms of 1391, King Martin handed down death sentences to those responsible, executing 8 people in Barcelona. Local rulers sought to emulate this royal power to intimidate their subjects. For example, during a cereal shortage in Barcelona in 1333 to 1334, the municipal leaders held a trial presided over by the king's representative, leading to 10 death sentences. The executions were spread across the city to serve as a warning to others. In the late 14th and early 15th centuries, royal governors used their authority to quell social strife. The governor of Aragon, for instance, applied harsh penalties in Teruel, and the governor of Majorca acted swiftly against accused individuals in 1408. When the governor of Valencia was assassinated in 1408, the king responded with death sentences. However, the power of these royal delegates was sometimes criticized for being arbitrary, especially in distant domains like Sardinia, where the governor's actions were seen as unreasonable. In 1421, the city of Cagliari complained to the king about the governor's unreasonable behavior, leading to a measure that required the king's signed confirmation for any death or mutilation sentence against a baron or knight. This distinction between the king's superior power and that of his representatives was a crucial step in balancing the distribution of authority within the kingdom. In the medieval city of Barcelona, the governors operated under a complex system of authority that often led to conflicts with the local municipal government. The governors were responsible for maintaining public order and handling judicial matters, but their actions frequently clashed with the municipal government's claims to traditional jurisdiction. This tension was particularly intense in Barcelona, a city already divided by political factions, where the governor often sided with the opposition against the ruling oligarchy. One notable incident occurred in April 1442, when the governor arrested 2 individuals on a ship that had just docked in the city. They were accused of a murder that had gone unpunished and were subsequently hanged. The city council protested to the queen, arguing that the governor lacked the authority to intervene on the ship because it was bringing food to the city and was under the local government's jurisdiction. The council also complained that the governor had used his residence in the lesser royal palace as a prison without proper authorization. Similar conflicts arose again in June 1443, further straining the relationship between the governor and the city council. During this period, the monarch played a crucial role in applying strong and exemplary judicial protection to those under his direct aegis, such as the domestics in the royal household. These positions were prestigious and provided royal protection. For example, in 1370, King Peter the Ceremonious imposed a death sentence on Francesc Roca, a second-hand clothes seller, for the murder of Riusech, the king's cellarman. This case highlighted the king's commitment to protecting those in his service. However, the legal system of the time also included guarantees that often contradicted the swift application of capital punishment. In 1333, the general courts approved the need for legal guarantees in cases involving torture or capital punishment. This was reinforced in 1393, when King John I, responding to a request from the municipal government of Perpignan, issued a warning that the governor or his deputy could not use torture or the death penalty without providing legal defense. Despite the monarch's supreme authority, his power to pronounce capital sentences had limitations. The king could not take over cases where full power was in the hands of another lord, and his attempts to remove trials from his own domains often faced resistance from municipal powers. The general courts further restricted the governor's ability to appropriate trials during the 15th century. The use of the death penalty was not just a royal prerogative, but also a tool for maintaining social order and intimidating potential lawbreakers. In 1375, during the Parliament in Leyda, King Peter the Ceremonious issued a law that imposed the death penalty on recidivist pimps. This was one of many measures aimed at enforcing social discipline, and was often promoted by the estates gathered in the general courts, who saw it as a way to maintain order and protect the interests of the community. The Crown's power to impose the death penalty also extended to economic crimes, particularly in the banking sector. In 1321, the general courts passed a law that imposed the death penalty on bankrupt bankers who failed to repay their debts. This law was further reinforced in 1333 and 1359, with additional measures to prevent the protection of such bankers by other lords. These laws were designed to ensure that financial crimes did not go unpunished, and to maintain the integrity of the banking system. The jurisdictional fragmentation of the country meant that the king's authority, despite his efforts to consolidate it, was often limited. While the monarch could issue laws and sentences, the practical enforcement of these laws was hindered by the jurisdictional powers of various lords and local governments. This reality underscores the complex interplay between royal authority and local governance in medieval Catalonia. In the heart of medieval Catalonia, the city of Girona was a bustling center of commerce and politics. The city's governance was a complex mix of royal authority, municipal self-rule, and the interests of powerful citizens. One such figure was a young woman, described as a Doncella o Filla de Ciutat de Girona, a maiden or daughter of a citizen of Girona. She, like many others, was bound by the laws and oaths of the city, which often carried severe penalties for disobedience, such as sots pena de cap de perdre, under penalty of losing one's head. The city's records, such as the Liber Verd de la Ciutat de Girona, Green Book of the City of Girona, detail the stringent rules and the harsh punishments that governed daily life. For instance, in 1344, a document from the Green Book notes a specific case where a citizen was required to execute a commission involving the nobleman Guillaume de Montcada and his accomplices, who were accused of robbery and receiving protection from the Tarragona viscounts against the will of the king. The citizen was warned, Algutzir, menom vos sots la fi e naturosa de que asterisk, enes sots tangud e sots pena del cap o perdra, which translates to, Algutzir, I command you by the faith and natural duty you owe me, under penalty of losing your head. The tensions between rulers and subjects were not limited to Girona. In the broader context of the Crown of Aragon, the king's authority was often challenged by powerful nobles and local officials. For example, the king's command to a governor in Catalonia, Vasti himius manam asserta scientia e expressament sots pena de perdicio et de mort, translates to, we command and order you with certainty and expressly, under penalty of destruction and death. Such commands were not empty threats. They reflected the harsh realities of medieval governance, where the line between law and tyranny was often blurred. The abuse of power was a common theme in the medieval crown of Aragon. Flossel Sabate, a historian, has extensively studied the cases of corrupt officials and the measures taken to curb their excesses. One notable example is the harsh treatment of those who rebelled against the king's authority. In one instance, a group of rebels were publicly executed, with the king's chronicler noting, "E hanken, high alguns qui forn rossagats e penjats, e alters solament penjats." Some were dragged and hanged, and others were only hanged. The severity of these punishments was meant to serve as a deterrent to others who might consider challenging the king's rule. The city of Tarragona also saw its share of political turmoil. In 1348, a pogrom against the Jewish community was recorded in the city's documents. The incident was a result of the Black Death, which had caused widespread panic and led to the scapegoating of Jews. The city's records detail the violence and the subsequent legal actions taken to address the incident. The tension between religious and political authorities was palpable, as seen in the conflict between lay and ecclesiastical notaries in Girona, which lasted from 1347 to 1380. The reign of King Martin I, known as Marti el Huma, was marked by significant political challenges. The king's efforts to govern effectively were often hindered by powerful noble families and local officials, who sought to expand their own influence. The king's chronicler noted, "Manant al gobernador general de Catalunya e portant views de quell, veger, sutsveger e battle de Girona," commanding the general governor of Catalonia and the voices of the viscount, subviscount, and bailiff of Girona, highlighting the complex network of authority and the king's attempts to maintain control. The tension between the king and his subjects was not just about power, but also about justice. The writings of Francesc Aiximnes, a prominent medieval Catalan author, reflect the moral and legal debates of the time. In his work, he emphasized the importance of due process and the rule of law, arguing that even the king must act within legal bounds. Aiximnes wrote, "Seigneur, no hi ha qui el mat ni qui el de Gaul, car la ley hi contrasta e lo fer de la terra, qui sun coses pus forts que vas e qui manen, mes que vas e qui manen a vas, Lord. There is no one who can kill or behead him, for the law and the force of the land are stronger than you and govern more than you." These documents and historical accounts paint a vivid picture of a society where the struggle for power, justice, and survival was constant. The harsh penalties, the public executions, and the legal debates all reflect the complexities of medieval governance and the delicate balance between the ruler and the ruled. Despite the challenges, the people of Girona and other Catalan cities continued to navigate their lives, bound by the laws and oaths that defined their world. The intricate web of jurisdictions in Catalonia, rooted in its early medieval origins, evolved through the High Middle Ages and into the Late Middle Ages, shaping the region's unique social and political landscape. The early formation of various counties during the Carolingian period, the consolidation of feudal lordships, and the rise of urban centers contributed to a fragmented system of governance. This fragmentation was further solidified by the crown's need to cede territories, often as loans, leading to a complex network of jurisdictions that persisted well into the 19th century. At the heart of this system was the concept of full jurisdiction, which granted the power to impose severe penalties, including the death penalty. This right was a clear indicator of authority, and was jealously guarded by those who held it. In 1283, the impassability between jurisdictional domains was officially sanctioned, ensuring that each domain operated independently, without interference from others. This fragmented system became a defining characteristic of Catalonia, lasting through the old regime. The power to impose the death penalty was a crucial aspect of this jurisdictional system. For example, the lordship of Solsona in 1286 had the authority to mete out punishments such as hanging, burning, breaking limbs, and branding. This power was not limited to the nobility alone. Any individual who held full jurisdiction, whether noble, bourgeois, or ecclesiastic, could exercise it. When John I granted La Roca de Villac in Barida to his treasurer, Romus Esplains, in 1391, he explicitly stated that the recipient had the right to punish wrongdoers in any manner he deemed fit, including the death penalty. The personal status of the jurisdiction holder was thus secondary to the authority granted by the land itself. Whether a noble, a bourgeois, or an ecclesiast, the holder of full jurisdiction had to demonstrate their power by publicly proclaiming their right to impose capital punishment. This was a common practice when there were changes in domain. For instance, when the Viscount of Rockaberty transferred his jurisdiction in Morellas to a citizen of Perpignan, the new lord, Johann Faber, made a public proclamation in the town square, declaring his authority and the penalties for disobedience, including the threat of hanging without mercy. These proclamations were not mere formalities. They served as a clear warning to the inhabitants and reinforced the lord's authority. In Valfagona de Riucorb, local representatives explicitly acknowledged the lord's full powers to impose and remit punishments, recognizing his merum and mixtum imperium, which encompassed both civil and criminal jurisdiction. The death penalty, therefore, was not just a tool of justice, but a symbol of power and control. It was a means by which lords and other jurisdiction holders maintained order and asserted their authority over their domains. This system of fragmented jurisdictions, each with the power to impose severe penalties, shaped the social and political dynamics of Catalonia for centuries, leaving a lasting legacy that influenced the region's development well into the modern era.